Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Student, ladies and gentlemen, well done. You are welcome to Katsina State Senior Secondary School Online Connect program powered by Exponential Computers. This is Biology class SS3, second term, lesson 1. And the topic is sense organs. Prepared and presented by Nuruddin Sani. Meaning of sense organs. Sense organs are the receptors of the body that receive internal and external stimulus. When we say internal, we means you know what we are referring to as to internal, something inside, external, something physical outside. When we say stimulus, anything that causes you to respond or to react, that is stimulus. Anything that evoke response, that trigger response to happen are called stimulus. For example now, the absence of food in the digestive tract will cause a stimulus of hunger, will cause a response, is a stimulus that cause a response of demanding of the food. And again, any object around you is a stimulus. If you put your eye onto that object, you are responding to that stimulus of sight because it contains light. Light emanates from that object. So in a nutshell, when we say sense organ are specialized part of our body that receive various signals either from external environment or from internal environment. So they are making us aware of various changes in and out of our environment. When we say external environment, we mean the surrounding where we live. When we say internal environment, we say within our body. So many signals come from our body. Sometimes you see an individual yawning, indicating that he is either thirsty or he is feeling asleep. This is an internal signals. And also, sometimes you see an individual, when you saw a danger, you may try to react to the danger either by flying away from danger or facing the danger. So, sense organs are specialized part of our body that enable us to see, that is eye, or enable us to hear, that is ear, enable us to feel, that is skin, enable us to perceive chemical changes in the environment, that is nose, as well as enable us to taste various chemicals within the food items we often administer into our body for our well-being and survival. That is the tongue. So, change the stimulus into electrical impulses and then transported by sensory neurons to the brain, which translate them into smell, sound, picture, or sensation. So whatever signals, whatever stimulus from the environment, for we to be able to realize or to make interpretation of that stimulus, it must be transported by special types of cells in our bodies called receptors or sensory cells to the brain for interpretation, because our body doesn't understand any language except the brain language. For example, now when a student like you, a friend or a student, now take a needle and decide to hunt another student with that needle, to chuck that needle onto the surface of his skin doesn't understand any language unless the brain language. That chucking of the needle, the receptors, the sensory cells around the area where the incidents happen must carry the same message in the form of electrical impulses to the brain. Then the brain will now interpret that message and bring the feedback back to the area, affected area. Then the student will now quickly retrieve his hand from the source of danger. That is why people that normally suffer from a problem we call paralysis of the body, these sensory cells, they are the ones that got damaged. They cannot carry signals to the brain. So if somebody has or a person has a paralysis, You can use a razor to start cutting his body, he will not feel anything. But the blood, of course, will start coming out from the damaged tissue. But the feeling of pain, because his skin doesn't understand any language unless the brain language, and the receptors that carry message from the skin to the brain for interpretation, they may no longer carry that message to the brain. So as such, the body will not understand anything. You will not feel any pain. The pain has gone. The same thing applicable during surgery. Anesthesia injection is often given to the patient before surgical operation. And that anesthesia injection, its work is to just make that sensory cells dormant to an extent that they cannot carry message to the brain. So they remain idle. So the doctor will now use their razors and their instrument and start cutting, dissecting your body, and you will not feel any pain because the receptors cannot carry any message to the brain for interpretation. And that is why when the anesthesia now is the effect of anesthesia is deactivated from your body after the surgery, you may begin to experience pain because pain receptors are now active. They can carry message in the form of electrical impulses to the brain, and the brain will now interpret the information. So in a nutshell, sense organs are specialized part of our body that enable us to see, that is eye, that enable us to smell, that is nose, that enable us to hear sound, that is the ear, that enable us to see pictures, that enable us to differentiate between temperature of our environment, either cold, hot, nature of the substance, whether fine particles, rough particles like the skin. Example of sense, examples or type of sense organ. There are different types of sense organs as follows: skin, ear, eye, nose, and tongue, which we have mentioned in our introductory part of the presentation. The skin as a sense organ. The skin contains general receptors. The receptors can detect touch, pain, pressure, and temperature. So the receptors that detect touch are entirely different from the receptors that carry pain message to the brain. And the receptors that carry pressure, that means deep grip on the person, are different from that are responsible for pain. And also we have receptors that are responsible for temperature. That is why even if you are blind, when water is presented to the person, you can use your own finger containing the skin. The moment you drop your finger, your skin will serve like thermometer. Your fingers will tell you whether the water present the temperature is low or high, whether they are cold or hot. At the same time, your skin will tell you about the pain. Even if you are blind, when somebody now come and use a knife to cut your body, you can be able to say that you are feeling the pain, even though you cannot see the impact or the person that is causing the trouble onto the surface of your body. So the skin contains 4 types of receptors, e.g. pain receptor, touch receptor, thermoreceptor, which we often refer to as temperature receptor, and pressure receptors. Skin receptors generate and impulses when activated. So whenever they are activated, they generate impulses, that is messages, and relay the messages to the brain. So the impulses are carried to the spinal cord and then to the brain, which interpreted them as pain, touch, pressure, hot or cold. So that is how the skin as a sense organ work. There are different types of receptors, and each receptor detects different type of stimuli. Next, the structure of the skin. This is how internally our skin look like. The skin is made up of 2 major layers. The outermost layer of the skin, that is what we refer to as epidermis, as you can see in this diagram, while the innermost layer of the skin, we call it dermis. And each of these epidermis and dermis, they are divided into other layers. The epidermis is divided into horny layer, granular layer, and malphizial layer, and each layer has its role to play. And the same thing applicable to dermis. It contains other blood vessels are found in the dermis, and the nerve endings that are responsible for carrying out certain sensations or impulses to the brain for final interpretation. The ear as a sense organ. Human ear is used to perceive sound and to maintain balance for the body. Many people will wonder to say that our ear maintain balance. Our balance is not our two legs that make us to stand erect, but also the ear carry out a special function in ensuring stability of an individual. That is why when sometime when you take bath and it happens that in the bathroom the water enter into your ear, you may find out that you may lose balance. You continue moving from one place to another, shaking your head, trying to remove the water out of the ear. So the ear is part of the body that ensures stability or equilibrium of an individual organism. Human ear is divided into three portions, namely outer ear, middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear comprises the earlobe, the pinna, that means the external ear, and the ear canal, all of which can be seen externally, while pinna is made up of cartilage. When we say cartilage, means the soft bone, which we call a biscuit's bone, gurungursi in Hausa, and covered by the skin. The ear canal and the middle ear are separated by a thin flexible membrane known as the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. The middle ear consists of three tiny bones, or we call them ossicles or tiny bones, namely the malleus, incus, and stapes, and an ear-filled cavity called the tympanic cavity. The three ossicles are attached to the ear by ligament called the auditory tube, and by the round and oval window. The ear as a sense organ. The ossicles receive amplified and transmit sound from the tympanic, that is the eardrum, tympanic membrane, to the inner ear. Ossicles amplify sound by 15 to 20 times. The eustachian tube also connects the middle ear to the nasopharynx. That is why sometimes most of the eardrum, the moment they are being dropped into the air for the purpose of medication, sometimes you feel them in your throat, meaning that there is a connection between your throat and the ear. And that tube that connects your ear and the throat, that is what we call eustachian tube. The inner ear is the delicate part of the ear, which is housed in a bony chamber called a bony labyrinth. It has two parts, namely the cochlea and the vestibular apparatus. The cochlea is spiral shaped and contains many hair cells, which projection called cilia. The vestibular apparatus are the semicircular canals, which also contain hair cells, and these semicircular canals, they are the structures that ensure or that perform the function of balance, that ensure balance in the human body. The hair cells in the cochlea are responsible for hearing, whereas those that are present in the vestibular meant to maintain balance, as I have said just now. The structure you can see here is the ear and the division of the ear: the outer ear, the middle ear, the inner ear. So the whole ear is divided into three regions. The outer ear consists of the auricle, the pinna, the ear canal, the eardrum. They are all part of the outer ear. While the middle ear consists of these ear ossicles, that means three tiny bones, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. While the inner ear is comprised of two major parts, the cochlea and the vestibular, as we have said. The structure of mammalian ear. The human ear is used to perceive sound and to maintain balance of the body. Human ear is divided into three portions, namely outer ear, middle ear, and the inner ear. And the outer ear comprises of the earlobe, pinna, and the ear canal, all of which can be separated, can be seen externally, as we have said previously. The pinna is made up of cartilage and covered by the skin. The ear canal and the middle ear are separated by thin flexible membrane known as tympanic membrane, the eardrum. The middle ear consists of ossicles, tiny bones, namely malleus, incus, and stape, and an ear-filled cavity, the tympanic membrane. For the purpose of emphasis, we are just repeating it. The inner ear is the delicate part of the ear, we have said it previously, which is housed in a bony chamber called the bony labyrinth. It has two parts, namely the cochlea and the vestibular, the semicircular canals. As vestibular apparatus are also called semicircular canal. Function of the ear. Our ear carry out two major functions. The mammalian ear performs two major functions, hearing and balance. But the main function of the ear in human is hearing, which involves many steps. So take note, we are going to explain now the mechanism of hearing, which is one of the questions that WAEC or NECO normally ask students to describe the mechanism of hearing. That means describe how do we hear sound. Mechanism of hearing in mammals. The sound wave, that means any wave or vibration or sound from outside, are directed inward with the helping of pinna, that is the external ear, the funnel. It then passes through the external auditory meatus to the eardrum. So here the sound is traveling into the first part or first region of the ear, which we call the outer ear. So the pinna part of the outer ear, the moment the pinna collects the sound passes through the external auditory meatus. From the external auditory meatus to the eardrum, that is the tympanum. The eardrum, on receiving the sound, it now vibrates. This vibration are amplified because it will now carry out a long journey. It has to reach the brain, so it must be amplified. So what will amplify the sound? These three ear bones, three tiny ear bones, ossicles, the malleus, the incus, the step, present in the middle ear, will amplify the sound so that it keep on traveling. Next slide. The amplified vibration is then passed into the inner ear from the middle ear. This causes the perilimb and the endolimb in the inner ear to vibrate also. So as the sound vibrates, it passes into the inner ear. The fluid into the inner ear will begin to vibrate. The vibration of the perilimb and the endolimb stimulate the sensory cells in the cochlea. That means the cochlea in the inner ear, to transmit the impulse to the auditory nerves of the brain. The auditory nerves of the brain, the auditory nerves carry the impulse to the auditory region of the brain. Then the brain interpreted the impulse as sound. So whatever message, whatever sound somebody is making, so the meaning of that sound, for you to make meaning out of the sound, it must pass through these processes. The sound wave, as we said, from the outside are collected by the help of pinna. It passes through the external auditory meatus to the eardrum. The eardrum, on receiving the sound, vibrate. The vibration are picked up by three tiny bones, which you call ear ossicles, and they amplify the vibration. And then the vibration will now move into the inner ear, causing the vibration of the two fluids found into the inner ear. And these two fluids are the endolymph and the perilymph. Vibration of the endolymph and the perilymph stimulate the sensory cells attached to the cochlea to carry out the sound vibration and relay them to the auditory nerves of the brain. Then the auditory nerves of the brain will now translate the information as sound, and it will now make meaning to the listener of the sound. So in summary, mechanism of hearing, we can explain this way point by point. The sound wave from outside travel and collected with the help of the external ear called pinna. From the pinna, it passed through the external auditory meatus. From the external auditory meatus, it gets into the eardrum. The eardrum, on receiving the sound, vibrate or shake. The vibration of the eardrum is amplified when it enters into the middle ear by the three tiny bones, which you call the malleus, incus, and step. They amplify the vibration and send the vibration down to the inner ear. In the inner ear, there are two fluids in the inner ear, the perilymph and the endolymph. The vibration causes the fluid to vibrate too. The vibration of the fluid in the inner ear stimulates the sensory cells in the cochlea, which will now carry the message and relay it into the brain in the form of electrical impulses. Then the brain will now interpret the sound as meaningful sound. It makes meaning to the listener of the sound. So that is the end of this presentation, listeners. Thank you for listening.